guess I can just stay right here because it follows me. I'd like to introduce Julia from Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. And she's going to talk to us about a very important thing this year because all of the, well, you'll talk about it, but Minnesota has a huge slate of people to be elected this fall. So voting our values is really important. And Julia's going to be talking about that for being here. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Sheila, you'll let us know if the sound is causing any trouble.
Yep.
But I will just continue on as if I have no devices on. All right. Well, so great to be here. My name is Julia, and I am indeed from Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. We are a nonprofit organization that works with faith communities across the state to grow the climate justice movement. So we have been at the Public Utilities Commission, asking them to create procedures and regulations that will encourage our utilities to create solar opportunities. We have been working with farmers to think about regenerative agriculture and carbon sequestration. We've been working on getting the state to restrict pipelines that will bring more fossil fuels into the world. So we do a broad variety of things. But what has happened over the last 10 years is that we've figured out that people really at the heart of the climate justice movement is the relationships that people have with each other. And we have developed something called a climate conversation. And we've done this across the state in, hundreds of places, thousands, tens of thousands of people have participated. And what we do is we ask you all to think about the experiences that are important to you in your lives, the things that make life worth living. And we ask you a little bit about what you know about the world, specifically, often it's about climate change, but today we're going to talk about the bigger world of the issues that we care about. And then we think about how we can take action together. So much of our work is actually doing leadership development and helping empower others to empower others. So my hope is today that what I can do is to help you think about what role you can play in the next month as we run up to the election, and how you can motivate friends and neighbors to be part of this historic election, and the kinds of ways that you can be empowered to make I think a pretty big difference. So thanks for the introduction. I totally agree. It's a critical time. So I'm going to begin by asking you to turn to a neighbor, and we'll make sure that everybody has a partner, and tell about a time in your life in which you stood up for something. So something you noticed in the world was not right, and something that you did made a difference when you took action. So I'm going to tell you a short story of my own. You can be thinking of your own stories. And then I'll give you about 5 minutes. One person can tell the story, and then the next person will tell the story. And then we'll move on and we'll talk more specifically about relational voting and how we're going to do that. Okay, so as you know, I work for a climate justice organization. I have been, prior to my current job, I worked at an experiential education study abroad organization in Minneapolis, and I took students around the state, and we met with leaders across the state, asking them, what were the sort of things that they were doing that made a difference. And we were studying about environmental sustainability, so climate change. And during 2009, this is a sort of far back story. During 2009, there's a big international climate conversation in Copenhagen, the Conference of the People, and it was a time where we could come together as a global community and weigh in on climate change and make some global agreements that would reduce greenhouse gases internationally. So this was the big opportunity. I had just really started focusing on the impact of climate change on our world. And I thought to myself, well, of course, smart global leaders are going to get together and they're going to figure out some solutions to curbing emissions by international trade agreements or whatever it was. I didn't even know. And so I got my students all hyped up about this. We went and talked to other people. We thought a lot about, getting people to watch the Copenhagen talks from their homes. And everywhere we went, people were sort of uninterested, didn't really know why we were so passionate about this global conversation. And it turns out those uninterested people that we were bumping into had something to, were probably maybe a little more accurate than I was. We got through those global talks and nothing had happened. The US had made no commitments. There was no action that was going to make a measurable difference. And I don't know if any of you all struggled with depression at different times in your lives, but I never really had a sort of a really dark season, and I had a really dark season because I had been sort of a go-getter and was working with students, and all of a sudden, there was just this, terrible, diagnosis of planet Earth and no leadership. And so I was depressed for, 4 or 5, 6 months. And finally I was sort of pulling myself out of the door and going running. I was forcing myself to run a little bit every day. And one day I'm running down the path and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling all right today. And I continued to run. And I guess it was those beautiful endorphins kicked in. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sit around and wait for these global leaders to do anything anymore. This is actually a moment in which it's going to have to be the people who make the difference. And I'm cruising along, and I start making a list of the people that I knew, and I was like, I'm ready to end this little funk that I'm in, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take action. And it was a huge, I'm sure you all have pivotal moments in your lives. You've lived long lives, right? There's moments where all of a sudden there's total clarity. And so I called up some friends of mine and we got together on my front porch, and we then went on to put together an event on the 10th of October, 2010, so 10-10-10. It was an event that was sponsored by 350.org nationally, and they were asking people, it's called the Global Work Party. They were wanting to see examples of people taking action across the world. And so we had over 500 people riding their bikes across the Stone Arch Bridge. Again, I work with students, so all these students came out and they organized all their friends to bring bikers. We had nonprofits and congregations and little neighborhood pods bringing their own solutions and having tables around the Mill Ruins Park in Minneapolis. And we have decided to make the focus of this to shut down the coal plant at the University of Minnesota. So we did it in the shadow of this coal plant. And anyway, it was a total success. From that event, the organization Minnesota 350 was born. And all of these students had an experience of not of telling people to watch some global leaders who were going to do nothing. Instead, they had an experience of pulling their friends out and putting together something that got in the Star Tribune. And anyway, it was an incredible experience. And I ended up switching my career and getting into organizing. So here's my invitation to y'all, and everybody doesn't have to have an organizing moment like that. Could be a moment with, where you talked to a teacher and it made a huge difference. It could be a moment in which you saw something happening in your family, and because you took action, you were able to shift the dynamic. But I'd like you to think about a time where you, felt something was wrong and you stood up for something and it made a difference. So I'm gonna just, if it's all right, if you guys could pair, and you guys, and you guys, and then the two of you. So I will give you about 2 minutes each. So in, 5 minutes or so, I will call us back together and I'll let you know when the first 2 minutes have passed. You're not gonna be able to tell the whole story like I did, but just, what are some of the elements of that story to each other? Which one?
Is it specifically about climate? Is that?
It does not have to be about climate, it could be about
Even number of years, so this year.
Sometimes we just not fun that you made it. And so then even, but even so Green Valley and story. So that.
Well, I think. The churches, more liberals of the University of Massachusetts. So these churches on the.
Okay, or you should switch if you haven't switched.
I was at
Right. They have to work on it. That respect.
Sometimes you look back yeah.
Yes.
All right, we're gonna, wrap it up. And so finish up. All right. Oh, I'm so sorry. Now got one group of three has got more to say. Let's just start. These folks can finish up as they're going. What about your stories made them a story in which you really felt empowered and connected? It is. How are you? Good. I'm Julia. I'm RB. Nice to meet you. So just a tiny little snippet from your story that made it about that made it a time that you really felt empowered. What about that context made it?
I don't know if I felt empowered. I just felt like I started doing something that other people could recognize. Mine was picking up dog food when I took my dogs for a walk. And the little neighbor girls, what are you doing? Picking up Stormy's dog poop. You don't have to do that. I said, yeah, I do. Well, other people don't. I said, yes, I know, but I do. And one time they saw me with picking up trash. Wasn't too long and I saw the little girls and one of them had, one in particular, she had a grocery bag. And I said, and what are you doing? I am saving the earth. I am picking up trash. And I said, very good. I said, you want to go? And she loved to go for walks. He said, it's okay with your mom. You want to walk with me and Stormy and Liddy? Yes. And I said, and bring your bag and we'll pick up trash as we go. It was just kind of fun.
Oh, it's beautiful. So this was something that you felt passionate about, not only being a model for those kids in the neighborhood, but also,
I don't even know if I felt like being a model for the kid. It's just like, this is the right thing to do. We pick up trash, you're not, it's like you're, but I was so cute. I am helping the earth. I am picking up. Good for you.
I love the story because, I actually as I was telling the story this morning, I was thinking to myself, there's a lot of different stories I could tell. And, that's sort of the story I told was sort of an epic story, right? I was like epically depressed and then I was sort of epically successful that one moment. But let me promise you that most of the moments in my life are not epically successful. It's more like, oh, my, teenage daughter actually had a 15-minute conversation with me. I was so successful. But I think that, being the person that you wake up to be and being consistent and being able to be part of a community in which what you do makes a difference to somebody else. That's what life is made of, right?
Yeah.
It makes it possible for us to wake up in the morning and have another day that feels good. Yeah, absolutely. Any other example you want to share? We don't have to do too much of this. I'll move us along. What I want to do now is I want to hear a little bit from you about how you're feeling about the world right now. So what is at stake? You know that we're here to talk about the election. There's a lot of things that are wrong. Again, I care a lot about climate change, but I care about a lot of other things as well. And, what is at stake that is in your heart about the world today? And I'm just gonna write some things down as you say them and we'll hold them together.
Write down our democracy.
Oh my God, yeah. What's happening in terms of democracy that's making you feel concerned?
Well, it seems like a lot of people feel that there's not as much value on that as it's better to have a dictator that keeps things under control.
Okay, so this idea that in the democracy that you care about, people are, showing up, standing up, participating in the world that we create together, and that's at stake.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Ukraine slash Russia, I guess.
Yeah. Why is that on your heart? All of these things are obvious, but I want to just pull a little bit
I mean,
more.
what I'll say is just obvious too, it's just kind of a ridiculous war, and so many innocent people are losing their lives, losing everything, their property, whatever, it's all because of, Putin, I guess, maybe has another couple that influences him, I don't.
Right. So as we think about it, it's this crazy situation. We heard from David that he's concerned about democracy here in the US, right? Or maybe across the world, right? And here we have an example of people who are, you know, some of them are cousins and relatives, who have had their lives totally upended in a way that was unexpected. It feels really scary. Not only because we hurt for the people who are hurting, but also because what does it say about the, you know, the peace that we've experienced for the last 1,600 years. What else is on your mind as you think about what's at stake?
There is a loss of the sense of shared reality with other people in this country in particular, but lots of places as well.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
So many people seem to be diametrically opposite to each other in terms of what they think is true.
What is true?
Heard somebody say the other day, they say, this is a true fact.
As opposed to an alternative fact.
That's right. Yeah. Right? Yeah, come on. Right, but where is the shared sense of what is real? I mean, I actually think that the three of these things totally relate to each other. Because, you know, if I wake up and I believe that in 5 years from now, my children will have graduated from high school and be pursuing adult lives in the way that I had the opportunity to do that, is that real? I mean, like, the reality that we experience has to do with the dreams that we have for the future as well. And if we don't know if the ground we're standing on is solid, it feels really.
Or that we can't agree that the ground is solid or not. It's not necessarily what the truth is, but it's this lack of ability to agree on whatever.
Yeah. And what happens when we don't agree on what's true?
We fight.
Argue.
Yeah, what else do we, I mean, it's not only that we argue, right? We're doing a lot
We
more to
divide
that.
ourselves. We divide ourselves. We go into different camps.
And then related to that too is, you go back 60 years ago or whatever, well, Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley, they told us what the news was, and we by and large took that as
Gospel.
what was really happening. And now you have, everywhere you look, you got a new internet app that's coming up with the latest theory about what's happening. They're presenting facts, and then you have alternate facts, and you have all these different sources. It's like one's going in this year, one's going in this year, and gets inside, well, what does it all mean? And maybe I can sort it out because you know, I've been around a little bit, I don't know, 72 years, but somebody younger is gonna get all mixed up.
Yeah. By the way, I am a bad speller. I used to teach 7th graders and they would get extra credit when they would find spelling mistakes. You all get no extra credit, but and I don't even know if I made a spelling mistake. That's the beauty of it. But what you're saying makes me think about like, if you have something coming in this way and something coming in this way, and there's 17 apps that you haven't even clicked on yet, like, what do we believe in? Right, and we're here to talk about action, taking action, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the psychology of trauma and what people do when they don't know what to believe in, right? But one of the biggest things that happens is that people become frozen, right? They don't know what to do. So it's not only that we don't know what is true or what is false, right? We also, at a point in which we don't know what reality is, we don't know how to get up in the morning and simply pick up the dog poop. That's a silly example, right? But it's not a silly example, right? It's nice to know who you are and where you're headed when you wake up in the morning. Yeah.
I think it's worth it, you know absolutely what the truth is, just because one man told you this is the way it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that, of course,
And so all the other media is giving you false information. And, I guess what, and the result is you have to physically do something, even if it's violent, to correct that situation that you absolutely certainly know is true. Even though
okay, this is so interesting. So we have on the one hand, we have authoritarian people who might tell us what's true and don't give us the ability to think for ourselves. On the other hand, we have this world that Paul has described that's like nobody can agree on anything. It's all up to you to figure out, sort through 1 million sites and 100 facts and, right? So where do humans and human psychology and human communities exist in the middle of those two places? That's my question for you. Yeah.
And that's actually tying in with what's been going through my head. Where are people's sense of taking care of others in all of this? As a human, aren't we supposed to always be wanting to help others and to, do something that's best for them, not necessarily best for me? And that seems to be so lost.
Right. This is just a shorthand statement, but something about when is this about me? And when is this about my community? And again, it's not a mistake that I'm here at Valley Community Presbyterian Church, right? Because one of the things that these institutions that we're part of do is to help us to focus on, it is not so much what, others do for me, it's what I can do for others that gives us meaning in our lives. I'm going to ask you all to tell me about a few more concerns that you have about the world, not just about the way the world's looking. Yeah.
Inequality, economic, education, housing, access to clean air.
Yep. I will say energy,
Yeah,
air, etc. Right, so we have at this moment in history, the, largest income gap in the history of our nation, between wealthy Americans and poor Americans. We have globally, of course, the same trend happening. We have billionaires and we have people who don't have enough to pay their electricity bill, even though they're making $15 an hour, working 40 hours a week. So, that gap continues to widen and it's causing all kinds of social and moral issues in our nation. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I just see so much apathy, like, this group of people really cares about all these things. But there's just so many people who seem to not care.
Absolutely. And we will talk about that a lot. Like if people don't know what to do, like apathy is like, it's like the place that they go. So yeah, let's come back to that. Other things, I'm gonna just write right up here. I'm like very concerned about climate change. The IPCC just came out last November, a year ago, saying that it's worse than they thought. It's happening faster. And if we don't, keep it to under 1.5 degrees, it's not just gonna be a climate problem, it's gonna be a, problem of such massive humanitarian, nature that, we will have, you know, just massive migrations, wars, et cetera. So, yeah, very concerned about the world that my children are gonna be living in, and the world that I am gonna inhabit for the next, whatever chapter of my life. That's very scary. What other issues do you have that are bothering you as you think about the, important election that's coming up? Yeah,
Women's health.
yeah. Yeah, that's what you were saying, absolutely. And for a lot of people, it's not just women's health, it's a lot of people are really concerned about reproductive rights and the rights of, over our own bodies. I know that my children are afraid to be in public places sometimes because of gun violence in this country.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people who are thinking about that. And it relates to these psychological things that I've got on the other side, right? You've got a bunch of people who don't know what reality is and feel totally insecure, and, you add the specter of mass shootings on that. It's much more scary. Okay, yes.
Would you add under inequality LGBTQ?
Yeah. Absolutely. People, being able to live their own lives. What does that look like when it comes to LGBTQ? Okay, well, this is heavy stuff. There's a lot here. There's a lot of actual things that are wrong. There's a lot of ways in which our society is maybe moving in the wrong direction in terms of our capacity to collectively deal with these really hard things. I think both of those are massive problems. I used to think that I was going to spend the rest of my life being a climate activist. And it is clear to me that I am not going to only be a climate activist. So what I am now doing in my life is being an organizer of people to feel empowered to take back, their world, their community, the place that we, to be able to envision a world where people live with each other, in peace and, possibly in conflict sometimes, but that they organize their conflicts in such a way that it doesn't turn into a Ukraine. All right. So thank you. That is really good. I want to just step back for one more second. The next part of like when I usually have a conversation with people, I ask people to take a breath with me, and I'll do that with you here. So. Breathing, of course, is this gift that the Creator has given the human body, and more effective than any number of psychological medications to bring us to a place of calm and stasis is just taking a breath. So when we think of the heaviness of this list that we just made, how do we feel? And this is sort of a microcosm of what we've already talked about. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm the only person that would say this, but probably not. What I think about then is, gosh, aren't there some good things that are happening in the world? And so is it worthwhile to make the list of them? Or is that not where we're going here? I don't know.
Absolutely. It's not where we're going right this
This
millisecond,
okay.
But it is where we're going.
Okay. No,
So thank you. So when you say, how do you feel? You say, wow, this is a real bummer of a list. And I ask you what's at stake.
It's not to not emphasize those things that are bad, but maybe there are some good things happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that, because when we start to think about elections, right? If we're going to go, I'm going to invite you all to make a list and to go out and talk to people, that's the goal of this session here. You know, you can call up your brother who you think might not vote. I have no idea if you have a brother who might not vote, whatever, and say, hey, it's really important to vote. You know, here's what is really on my heart, what I feel like is at stake, right? And you also might say, I am so excited about what this local politician in my neighborhood did for the community. Instead of doing X, they had this really brilliant plan of creating jobs and building solar at the same time. And we need to elect the leaders who are gonna give us the, give us the positive examples of how we can come together. That might be the best conversation that you could have. So I love that you brought that up. Yeah. What else? But how do you feel when how do you feel when you look at this list? Overwhelmed.
Kind of hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Powerless.
powerless.
It's like a big responsibility.
It's a big responsibility. Yeah. So here's what I'm going to tell you just for a second about psychology. We've already been talking about this a little bit. But when we think about the psychology of humans experiencing really difficult things like this, sometimes we can use the word trauma. And there's a psychologist named Mary Piper. She talks about how, if you watch somebody be murdered on the streets, you may wake up at night thinking about that image. That's trauma. And if you experience that again and again, it's, you've been experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome. She said, what is often underappreciated is that people get PTSD, not just from seeing things that are horrible, but they get PTSD when they are unable to take action to do something that they know that they need to do. So if you are sitting in an airport and somebody that you love is in a hospital far away, and you can't get to them because there's no flights, you can actually have total PTSD because of that experience. And you can have PTSD if I'm thinking about COVID and all the people who were not able to be with their loved ones. That what our society is going through right now, post-COVID and post the uprising in Minnesota, and as we sort of reach a place of both, real awareness and reckoning with these kinds of issues, but also what Paul was talking about, like this crazy sense of not knowing what's reality that creates a numbness and an apathy that is sort of overwhelming, that's actually a societal response to trauma. And we're seeing it across the board. So while, in 1950, people maybe were, actually, I'm not going to talk about 1950 because people were totally experiencing trauma in 1950 as well. But I grew up in the, middle of the 1980s. People were, not experiencing maybe total social trauma on a scale that we're experiencing right now. People were cheerful about getting together and talking about problems and feeling like there were solutions and getting out and doing that work. That is something that has sort of disappeared for many people. So in the midst of COVID and in the midst of all of these global problems that are completely, untenable and that we have no power over, it's a cognitive dissonance. If somebody tells you the world is ending, but there's nothing you can do about it, what's the best response in your heart and your brain? What would your body do if you have no power to change anything?
Go to bed.
Go to bed. That's right. Numb out. Watch Netflix. Why would you bother voting if you thought there was no reason for you to do that because you were powerless, right? And the thing is that societally across the nation, we are feeling powerless because of the experiences of the last 5 years. And because, we see the news on Ukraine, at least I feel like we saw it for 3 months and then it sort of disappeared, which is also chilling, right? Because it's still happening. All that stuff is still happening. If you see it, but there's absolutely nothing you can do, your human heart psychologically goes into this sense of numbness. So if you were to go to a psychologist's office and you had just witnessed a really grisly thing and you were trying to, get over the post-traumatic stress that you were feeling, what would the advice of that psychologist be? Anybody know? You gotta get together with other people, you gotta look the problem in the face, and you've gotta figure out how to take action. You've gotta have some personal power in helping to solve the problem. The answer is never just to stuff it and move on, right? That's always the wrong answer. And
Use your anger wisely.
yeah, you've gotta figure out how to come together in groups of people and to figure out something that you do actually have power over. It's called locus of control. It's like where the world meets a place where you can actually be powerful in it. And that's what you illustrated, right? That was a place where that little girl could wake up in the morning and have power. There's many things in your life that you do that are more important than picking up the dog poop, right? But what you did is you created a scenario in which that kid woke up in the morning and was like, this is something that even as a child, I can have the power to do. That gave her a sense of, I can take on the world. And that may be something now, maybe she's the head of her student council and is able to make decisions. You know what I'm saying? That's the way that we build a culture and a society in which people are able to take power. Okay, so how does this relate to elections? I'm not going to solve any of these problems that we've just listed today, although I do have positive examples of things that are happening in every one of those categories.
Oh, you're not gonna name the candidate who's gonna fix this?
No.
Well, what did we come for?
Well, you have an idea. Yeah.
Pat and Mary Ann probably already know that I do this. Before the 2020 election, I became aware of an organization that, I don't know, an election before that, I tried to volunteer at a campaign headquarters and do some stuff and make some phone calls. And I literally hated it. It's not my deal. I don't go out door to door to talk to people. I just can't do it. But I became aware before the 2020 election of an organization that provides you with names and addresses and a template, a letter. And it provides you with names and addresses of people all over the United States who are registered voters, but have a poor record of voting and don't always go out and vote. And you get this letter and you say, "Dear Charlie, there's an election coming up on November 8th. And I vote because," and you're not to promote a candidate, a party, an issue, nothing. And I write, "I vote because I think it is the most important right we have. And I want to make sure that my opinion is counted." And then at the bottom, it says, "In your area, you can vote at," right now I can't even.
Sure, absolutely.
And then you put it in an envelope and you put their name on it. You do not put your last name on it.
Yep.
Put your first name. And there's a date to send.
Yep.
Have you heard of this?
October 20th, vote forward. It's vote forward.
Yeah, I love it. In fact, I got together with my kids in that same season, and we had the kids decorated postcards. So they did a collage on the back of the postcard, and then they wrote in their little people's language. What beautiful. Okay, I'm going to share some slides with you, which will hopefully bring this idea alive. But I love that idea, and I totally support it.
Well, it's safe and it's not threatening for me or anybody else. It's just.
Right, it's easier than making the phone calls, and I do that too.
Totally.
I have sent out letters.
All right.
Greg knows I have envelopes on his dad's desk.
Okay,
I
Sheila,
need to
put
do it
those up.
this time. Yeah.
I'm gonna whiz through a few slides to give you some context, and then I'm gonna ask you all to do a little bit of homework. And then, we're gonna send ourselves off at 11 or at 12:05. Okay, so you can put those slides up, that's great. Okay, so we're gonna talk about relational organizing, which is this, what you've described as a version of that. You're telling your story why you care. So keep going to the next slide. If you want to, you can just hit the slideshow, or this is fine. Perfect. Well, now you're just gonna go forward a bit.
Yeah.
So the next slide is to just show you that this is a totally historic election because everything is up for grabs in Minnesota. And people don't, what's here there, people don't actually vote in midterm elections nearly as much as in presidential elections. So in 2020, there was 79% of people in Minnesota of eligible voters voted, which is like one of the top in the nation. But in the midterms, it's like 50% or 52% or something like that. So what it is for all of us is a huge opportunity to reach out to people who are responsible people. They vote, but like David says, they're feeling very worried about, they may not be worried about democracy, but they're, whatever, they're not participating. Okay, so go ahead, next one. Okay, I'm gonna just look at my own screen so I can see the full one. That just shows you that midterm elections, people don't vote as much. Can you get rid of that edit?
Well, yeah, I can, but I can't do.
Or if you could just make it smaller, then we could see it. Yeah, I just can't see the slides myself right now. Okay, so our goal was conversations. You can keep going for, oh, perfect. Wonderful. Yeah, just do it this way. This is perfect. So what we are encouraging people to do from Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light is to encourage people to pledge to vote. So one of the things that, if you're talking to somebody, a neighbor, you can say, are you willing to commit to me that you'll vote? You promise you'll vote. And it seems a little awkward, but there's all sorts of data that shows if you get somebody to tell you that they'll pledge to you or to promise to you that they'll vote, that they keep that in their mind. And so one of the messages that I have for you is that it's in the time of an election, it might feel intrusive to be sort of talking to people about voting, but why is that? Elections and government, governance is all about our collective well-being. And yet we've gotten this idea in society that it's rude to talk to other people. It may be rude to say, are you going to vote for my candidate, right? You don't want to do that. But if you can say, this is really important to me that we protect our democracy. I care a lot about housing. And so I'm going out to vote because I care about housing. I'm happy to tell you more about that, but I mostly care that you just vote. What are the things that you care about voting about? And maybe somebody say, well, I'm really concerned about education. And you can say, yeah, tell me more about that. And then they tell you, and you say, I want to make sure that you're going to pledge to vote and that you'll look into what the candidate says about education, that you're not just going to, go off of a sheet and vote for somebody that somebody else told you to vote for, right? You want people to be, one of the things that you can do is if you get into a really good conversation with somebody across the fence or in your congregation, you can say, hey, if you're passionate about building democracy and protecting it, maybe you can also go and find two people who can't vote. If you let people know that we have that 30% of voters in Minnesota just sit out the midterm election. Ask everybody to go find two people that they know that care about, the president and they care about democracy, but they just don't think it's important, right? We already know that we have a collective PTSD, that people are numb right now and they think that their action doesn't make a difference. So if you go and you ask somebody, say, can you just, even if you don't feel like it in the morning, just commit to me that you're going to get up and vote. Right. And do you all know there's different ways to vote, right? You can vote by mail. You can vote by, you can vote early. So early voting has started in Minnesota. So you can go down to the government center in Golden Valley or Minneapolis or wherever it is and vote right now. So if somebody's like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna be doing that week in November on November 8th, you can say, well, no problem. I could even pick you up on Tuesday and take you to the government center, right? And once you get them to vote, say, who are two more people who might not have voted like you? And can you go and tell the story of how you got to vote? That's called tripling your vote, right? So your vote counts 3 times if you can actually get 2 more people to get out to the polls. Okay, go to the next slide. Thank you, Sheila. You're okay, go to the next slide. We talked about that. Go to the next slide. There's all kinds of ways to get absentee ballots. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that people go asking for them right now because we're sort of running into a little bit of a timing crunch. My recommendation is if you know people, if they're going out of town, that you get them to the polls to vote early. Okay, next one. Okay, so there is a website that is votemn.org. Go to the next one. That one, yeah. mnvotes.org. One of the things that it makes it a little easier to talk to people. If you're talking to somebody and you don't want to be rude, you can say, you know, I just went to this presentation by this gal, Julia. She was talking about how depressed she was about democracy, and we were thinking about what's at stake. And, you know, I committed to her to find 10 people. You know, would you be one of my 10 people? If you can joke about that for a second, say, but no, really, one of the reasons it's so important that we get out and talk about this is that because of the redistricting, lots of people's polling places are different. So I want to just check in with you and make sure you know where to vote. So my polling place changed. Do any of you know if your polling places have changed?
Yes.
Right. So this is like a great opportunity for relational conversations because you don't have to be rude. You know, if I say, hey, Pat, you know, you're like, of course I'm going to vote. You know, how annoying that you're asking me. You can say, well, we've learned that it's, you know, we're pretty alarmed that a lot of people won't know where to vote. So of course, you know where to vote, but can you help me get the word out about other people who are voting? So one of the ways to not feel, decline. Sorry about that. One of the ways not to be rude is to be letting people know that they can, that you can help them find out where to vote and that they can help other people to find out where to vote. You know, so if you had just gone and told the little girl, you should go pick up stuff, right? And, you know, if you tell her, you show her, and then she goes and does it herself, it's a much more sort of powerful, complete circle, right? And so in the same way, if you talk to your brother-in-law and you say, hey, you know, I just went to this presentation. I'm really concerned about democracy. I didn't know that we were in a, you know, whole society PTSD because of COVID and everything else. People are numb and the experts are really worried that they're not going to go out to vote because the polling places have changed and because everybody is in collective depression. So, you know, will you not be one of those people who doesn't vote? And then will you help? Will you help me help other people figure out how to vote? And that mnvotes.org is a good place to go. We're asking people to sign a voter pledge. You can choose to do that if you want. I don't think that's incredibly important, but I think it, again, asking people to pledge to do it, there's all kinds of research that shows it makes a big difference. All right, next slide. Okay, so relational organizing is about building power within your own community and your sphere of influence. So family, neighbors, coworkers, friends, people you see regularly, acquaintances, the person at the grocery store. You guys could just become the most annoying people in the neighborhood. And I say that with jest, right? Like if you can get people excited about building back our democracy, you will be doing a huge service. Okay, next slide. they've shown that it's totally more effective to talk to people you know rather than talk to strangers. That's why they want you though to also to write the postcards with handwritten notes and tell your own story. Way more effective to get a postcard and a handwritten, somebody's story. Even more important if that person happens to be a person that you know. So if you were to send a note to each of your nephews and nieces and write a handwritten note and say why you're passionate about it, that's gonna make, they're gonna think about that handwritten note from you. We don't have enough handwritten notes. So, okay, next slide.
But what they'll tell you is don't use cursive because not everybody can read it.
Good point.
That was the new thing.
Yeah, okay, next slide, that's not important. Okay. Okay, next slide. The messenger matters, right? Like your nephews and nieces are gonna be much more interested in your opinion than in somebody that they've never met. Okay, so here's what I'd love you to do. We're about to be done with this. But I'd love you to think about, actually, let's keep going. We're gonna think about who the people that you know are. Okay, keep going. Go down to the last one with the green. That one, yeah. Okay, so I would love for you, as you think about this, to take a few minutes to brainstorm the people that you want to add to your personal contact list. I don't have pieces of paper for you. I should have, that was a mistake. Actually, you know what I do have? Here we go. You all have pencils in here. Well, being here, I'm gonna give everybody.
Greg, there's a
Take one of
couple
these and
pens
pass
on
them.
it.
I want you to write down on your clothing. I know it's not easy. There you go. It's got some pens for you. Try to think of at least 10 to 20 people, and you could be thinking of friends and family members, close friends and family members, people in your high school you haven't talked to in a while, people whose Facebook posts you like. Could be anything. So think of a few minutes, think of 10 to 20 people. And we just give you a moment.
You think that it's down.
Yeah.
Yeah, then community.
Oh, there's this, you could write.
So these are people that you would ask to vote.
That you would have a conversation with about why you care about this election. Listen to their story about why they care about the election, and then make sure that they know how to vote and pledge to vote and stuff like that, yeah. All right, I'm gonna, do you have 10 on your list yet? Yeah, can you just turn to one of your neighbors and say, you know, I'm gonna contact each of these people, just. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back because we're getting towards the end of our time together. So you have these lists. You have what I invite you to do, and we didn't spend a lot of time talking about sort of a script for a conversation, but I'll offer this to you. If you say you call somebody up, I'm gonna call my brother. He's kind of a he's on the left end of the liberal spectrum, but he kind of thinks that all of government is not really for him. And but I'm gonna call him. And I'm gonna start out by saying, you know, I really care about democracy in this world. I'm really thinking about the world that my kids are gonna, you know, be growing up in. I think democracy is at risk. And I really care about climate change. I might tell them a few words about what I think about it. And I'd be like, what is at stake for you in this election? You don't want to say, you know, I'm thinking maybe you're not going to vote, right? You're going to say, what's at stake for you in this election? And they can be like, I hate elections. You can be like, well, you know, what is at stake? What is the world that you want to, you know, that you want to see? And listen to them. It's totally okay if what they care about is not the same thing as what you care about. Because what we're trying to do here is to create a sense that collectively we are going to take care of each other and of the future, right? We need people to be thinking about LGBT rights and education and housing and energy and climate and farming and, you know, all of those things, right? So like if they have something that's like really that they're passionate about, that's awesome. That's helping us to have a rich democracy. And then you can say, you know, I don't even care who you're going to vote for, but I really want to make sure that you have the tools that you need to vote. And part of the reason is that we have this historic election. We know that people don't vote in midterms elections. And we also know that there's this incredible hiccup with all these polling place changes. Do you mind if I look up your polling place for you? And you get on the computer and you look up mnvotes.org and ask, you know, find their address and be like, oh, it looks like you're voting at Jefferson School. And they'd be like, oh, that's not where I voted before. And you'd be like, oh, well, it's probably because the polling place has changed. So give them that information. And at the end of the conversation, say, can I count on you to vote? And I'm hoping to triple my vote. Would you be willing to try to talk to 2 people? Can you imagine the power that we would have, even with just 10 of us in this room? If each of us call 10 people and each of them call 3 people, you know, we have just made a huge difference in the number of people who turn out. One of the things that I will invite you to do, if there's somebody here who'd be willing to, do you have somebody to host a table here during fellowship, coffee fellowship? We have some materials that are this little be a voter. It gives people information about the general election, tells people at mnvotes.org. You guys can have these if you want them. And pass them out. We have voter registration forms, which we can send you. Yeah,
I'll just take that stuff.
Great.
We have a mission thing next week. We could do it then. So, yeah.
Great. So if you could do that. I love this idea of postcards. If you, I don't know if they're still doing that program this year.
Oh, yeah.
If they are, you should just go for it, do that. It's great if you could have some pens there, let the kids decorate cards.
Voteforward.org.
Voteforward.org, but if you guys could get those names from them and start to, you know, let people come to your table and just fill out one postcard and you can mail it for them.
Yeah,
In case.
I've already got 75 letters to mail.
Perfect. Well, then you can bring another 75 postcards and get people to do that from your booth. But most importantly, when you're at that table, if you could make sure to check people's polling places, people are literally, the Secretary of State is very concerned that people are not going to be able to vote because they're going to go to the wrong place. So, and these are people in your community, smart people, people who just have a lot on their minds and are thinking about this. People who are traumatized because their mother was in the hospital and they couldn't see them during COVID, right? It's not unrelated. What we're feeling as a society, the powerlessness that we feel. And this is an opportunity for you to see each person. And I'm really encouraging you, you may totally disagree. You may think they're even gonna vote for like somebody that you totally disagree with. But even if they do, we're all winning if we can make sure that we are, you know, participating in democracy in a way that engenders really rich conversation. So that's my message for you. And I hope it was a useful conversation that we all had today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.